In the dim back room of Murphy's saloon, Serafina Mae Washington sold herself to save her dying child. The gold coins caught lamplight as they slid across the scarred wooden table. Her baby Tobias burned with fever in her arms, each shallow breath a countdown she couldn't bear to watch. The man across from her had hands like weathered leather. Scars traced his knuckles in pale lines. His eyes held depths she couldn't read. 3 years of service. His voice carried the weight of worn stone. Room, board, medicine for the child. The contract lay between them like a gravestone. Seraphine's fingers trembled as she reached for the pen. The ink might as well have been her blood. I ain't got no other choice. Ezekiel Thornfield watched her sign away her freedom. His face remained carved from granite, but something flickered behind his eyes, something that might have been pain. Choices are all any of us got. Question is what we do with them. The words hung in the stale air. Tobacco smoke and whiskey couldn't mask the scent of desperation that clung to everything in this place. Serafina finished writing her name and set the pen down with finality. Zeke collected the papers with careful hands. The transaction was complete. She belonged to him now, at least on paper. 3 days before, hope had still lived in her chest. Serafina had knelt beside Tobias in their one-room shack, watching fever consume him bite by bite. The child barely stirred when she touched his burning forehead. His father's eyes stared up at her from a face too small to hold such suffering. Marcus had been dead 2 months. The mind collapse took him quick, they said. Merciful, they called it. Nothing merciful about what it left behind. The medicine Tobias needed cost more than she'd see in a year. Dr. Henley made that clear when she'd begged at his door. His words cut deeper than winter wind. Payment up front. No exceptions. She'd tried everything. Knocked on every door in Copper Ridge. Offered to scrub floors, wash clothes, tend livestock. The answers came wrapped in different words, but carried the same meaning. Not for your kind. Not with a baby, not when decent folk need work. The last door had closed with particular force. Serafina stood in the dust, holding Tobias close, watching the curtains twitch shut. The child's breathing grew more labored with each passing hour. That night, she'd overheard the saloon girls talking. Their painted faces caught lamplight as they whispered about contracts and arrangements, about men who paid for more than drinks. Thornfield's different, one had said. Pays fair, doesn't demand what he shouldn't. Seraphine's stomach had turned to lead. But Tobias wheezed in her arms, and desperation made monsters of decent people. Madame Cordelia had looked her up and down with calculating eyes. The woman's rouge couldn't hide the hardness underneath. He needs domestic help. Cooking, cleaning, ranch work. Nothing more unless you choose it. The words "unless you choose it" echoed in Seraphine's mind. As if choice meant anything when your baby was dying. He's a hard man, Cordelia had continued. But he pays fair and doesn't take liberties. That's more than most offer. Serafina had nodded, not trusting her voice. The arrangement was made. With handshakes and whispered details. 3 days to think it over. 3 days to watch Tobias fade. Now in the saloon's back room, those 3 days felt like a lifetime. Zeke folded the contract and tucked it inside his coat. The gesture held finality. We'll head out at first light. He stood, hat in hand. Bring what you can carry. Everything else will be provided. Serafina rose on unsteady legs. Tobias felt lighter in her arms, as if the fever was burning him away from the inside. She'd signed papers that made her property, but at least her son might live. The medicine? Already arranged. Doc Henley will bring it tonight. Relief flooded through her so sudden and complete that tears sprang to her eyes. Zeke's expression didn't change, but he looked away from her gratitude. Don't thank me yet. Contracts for 3 years. That's a long time. The warning hung between them. Serafina understood. Kindness at the start meant nothing if cruelty waited at the end. She'd heard stories about what happened to women who signed contracts with strange men. But Tobias stirred in her arms, and maternal instinct overrode fear. Whatever came next, she'd face it. She'd signed away her freedom, but she'd bought her son's life. In the harsh mathematics of survival, it was a trade she'd make again. Zeke moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. The boy's your responsibility, no one else's. That clear? Serafina nodded. The clarification confused her. Weren't they all his responsibility now? Good. He opened the door, letting in noise from the saloon proper. Sunrise, be ready. He left her standing in the empty room. Contract signed, future uncertain. The coins remained on the table. Payment for services not yet rendered. Payment for a life not yet lived. Outside, Copper Ridge settled into evening. Somewhere in the gathering dark, medicine was being prepared. Her son might wake tomorrow in a world where breathing didn't hurt. Serafina picked up the coins with steady hands. Whatever came next, she'd face it with eyes open. She'd sold herself, but she'd saved what mattered most. The door to Murphy's saloon swung shut behind her. The real journey was about to begin. Dawn came pale and unforgiving over Copper Ridge. Serafina waited by the saloon with her few possessions bundled in a flour sack. Tobias slept against her shoulder, his breathing easier after the medicine. The fever had broken sometime before sunrise. Zeke arrived on horseback, leading a gentle mare. He dismounted without ceremony, his boots stirring dust that settled on everything it touched. The boy better? Yes. The word carried weight she couldn't measure. Gratitude mixed with dread in equal parts. He helped her onto the mare without unnecessary contact. His hands were steady, impersonal. The gesture held no lingering touch, no hidden meaning. She couldn't decide if that relieved or worried her. The ride to Thornfield Ranch stretched across rolling hills that held their secrets close. Grass bent under wind that spoke of winter coming. Zeke rode ahead, never looking back to check on her progress. Trust or indifference, she couldn't tell which. The ranch appeared like a mirage made real. Buildings stood solid against the horizon, their wood weathered silver by sun and storm. Corrals held horses that lifted their heads at the approaching riders. Everything spoke of order imposed on wild land. Serafina had expected something smaller, meaner. This place held permanence that surprised her. Zeke dismounted at the main house and gestured toward a smaller cabin set apart from the others. Smoke rose from its chimney, promising warmth. That's yours. The boy's too. He led her across ground hard-packed by years of footsteps. The cabin door opened before they reached it. An old man emerged, weathered face split by a gap-toothed grin. This the lady, boss? Serafina Washington, her son Tobias. Zeke's introductions held no decoration. This is old Pete. Runs things when I'm away. Pete's eyes found the baby and softened. Been a while since we had little ones around here. Good sound, baby laughter. The cabin's interior stopped Seraphine's breath. Clean floors. Real windows with glass intact. A bed with actual sheets. A smaller bed built for a child, complete with carved railings. Made that yesterday, Pete said, nodding toward the small bed. Figured the little one needed proper sleeping. Zeke set her bundle on the table. Door locks from the inside. Keys on the hook there. The words carried meaning beyond their surface. Safety, choice, privacy that belonged to her. Your duties start tomorrow. Cooking for the hands, cleaning the main house, helping with ranch books if you're able. He paused, studying her face. You can read? Yes. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, exactly. More like pieces of a puzzle finding their places. Good. Books need proper tending. He left without ceremony. Pete lingered, hands working the brim of his hat. Don't mind his way. Boss ain't much for talking, but he's fair. Fairer than most. The old man's words carried weight earned through experience. Pete had seen other arrangements, other employers. His endorsement felt genuine. Anything you need, you just holler. Got medicine for the little one, if the fever comes back. Pete's eyes crinkled. Been looking forward to hearing young voices again. Serafina spent the rest of the day settling into space that felt too generous to be real. The cabin held more comfort than she'd known in months. Tobias crawled across floors that wouldn't give him splinters. The luxury of safety felt foreign. After so much fear, evening brought her first glimpse of the hands coming in from work. 5 men, weathered and quiet, who nodded respectfully when Pete introduced her. No leering glances, no whispered comments. Their manners held more courtesy than she'd received from supposed gentlemen in town. Zeke ate supper with the men in the main house kitchen. Serafina served the meal she'd prepared, watching interactions that revealed nothing of the man who'd bought her contract. He spoke little, listened much. The hands treated him with respect that seemed earned rather than demanded. After the men dispersed to their bunks, Zeke remained at the kitchen table. Account books lay open before him, numbers marching in neat columns. Serafina cleared dishes around him, waiting for instructions that didn't come. You keep clean books. She couldn't keep the observation inside. Numbers don't lie. He didn't look up from his work. Makes them easier to trust than most things. The ledger revealed a successful operation. Cattle sales, supply. Purchases, wages paid on time. Nothing suggested the hardscrabble existence she'd expected. Questions? She had dozens, but asking felt dangerous. Questions revealed interest, and interest suggested expectations she couldn't afford. No, he closed the books with deliberate care. Then get some rest. Days start early here. Serafina returned to her cabin as stars appeared overhead. Tobias slept peacefully in his new bed, breathing easy for the first time in weeks. She sat by the window, watching lamplight die in the main house. The first day had passed without incident. No demands beyond honest work. No suggestions of additional services. Zeke's behavior remained professional, distant, unreadable. She should feel relief. Instead, uncertainty gnawed at her. Kindness without explanation felt dangerous in her experience. Men who helped women like her usually expected payment beyond domestic service. Wind rattled the windows, carrying scents of hay and horses and freedom that might be real or imagined. Serafina undressed slowly, listening for footsteps that didn't come. The door's lock felt solid under her fingers. Tomorrow would bring its own tests. New routines to learn, expectations to meet, boundaries to discover. She'd signed a contract that bound her for 3 years. But the first day suggested those years might pass easier than she'd feared. Outside, night settled over Thornfield Ranch with familiar weight. Somewhere in the darkness, Zeke Thornfield sat alone with his thoughts and his secrets. Serafina pulled quilts up to her chin and listened to her son's steady breathing. The fever had broken. They were alive. Everything beyond that remained unwritten. Sleep came slowly, accompanied by dreams of locked doors and gentle hands and choices she couldn't yet see coming. 2 weeks passed in careful rhythm. Serafina learned the ranch's heartbeat through daily tasks that felt less like servitude than partnership. Zeke treated her work with respect, her opinions with consideration. The kindness felt dangerous in its consistency. Tobias grew stronger each day. He crawled across the cabin floor, babbling to sunbeams that painted everything gold. Pete carved him wooden horses that clattered across worn floorboards. The sound of baby laughter brought smiles to weathered faces. But questions multiplied in the quiet spaces. Late-night visitors arrived when honest folk slept. Serafina glimpsed them from her cabin window-shadowed figures who dismounted at the barn rather than the house. Hushed conversations carried on wind that revealed nothing but urgency. Zeke's behavior during these meetings shifted. His usual stillness became watchfulness. His hands rested closer to the gun he wore with practiced ease. Whatever business brought people to Thornfield. Ranch after dark, it wasn't cattle or horses. The third week brought answers she hadn't sought. Serafina was cleaning Zeke's study when sunlight caught paper edges beneath account books. Her fingers found them before her mind could stop the motion-wanted posters with familiar faces drawn in harsh lines. Her breath caught. Zeke's eyes stared back at her from yellowed paper, younger but unmistakable. The Thornfield gang, bank robbery, armed and dangerous. Curious thing, trust. His voice came from the doorway. Serafina spun, posters clutched in trembling hands. Zeke stepped into the room with measured calm, closing the door behind him. How long have you known? Her voice barely carried across the space between them. Known what? That you'd find them. Eventually? He settled into the chair behind his desk, movements deliberate. Been wondering when you'd look. Most folks can't resist secrets. The posters showed younger versions of men she'd seen around the ranch. Not all of them, but enough. Pete's face smiled from one corner, decades stripped away. You're outlaws. Were. The correction carried weight of years. Left that life when my daughter died. Been trying to make amends ever since. Daughter. The word hung in air thick with unspoken grief. Serafina saw it then, the careful way he watched Tobias, the pain that flickered when baby laughter filled the kitchen. She was 3. His hands found the desk's edge, knuckles white against weathered wood. Fever took her while I was running. From the law. Got home too late to say goodbye. The confession fell between them heavy as stone. Serafina understood the weight of almost losing a child. The guilt of being helpless while fever burned. The nighttime visitors? Folks who need help. Desperate people with nowhere else to turn. He gestured toward account books that told only part of the ranch's story. Money I stole bought medicine, food, safe passage. Figured if I was damned anyway, might as well do some good. Understanding crystallized sharp as winter air. The mysterious conversations, the careful secrecy, the respectful treatment of women and children who appeared briefly before moving on. Thornfield Ranch was a way station for the desperate. You ain't the first person I've helped, Serafina. But you might be the last if my past catches up. The warning carried genuine concern. For her safety, not his own. The realization shifted something fundamental. In her chest, why tell me, I could report you, could. He leaned back, studying her face with eyes that missed nothing. But you won't. Know why? She waited. Because you understand what desperation looks like, what it costs. What people do when they got no other choice. The words hit center mass. She did understand, had lived it. The willingness to sacrifice. Anything for a child's life created bonds stronger than law or social expectation. How many people know? Pete, the hands who stayed from the old days, few others. His fingers drummed once against the desk. Now you. Trust. He was giving her dangerous knowledge that could destroy everything he built. The gesture felt weightier than gold coins or signed contracts. The money from the robberies. Gone. Every last dollar spent on folks who needed it more than banks did. His smile held no humor. Turns out redemption's expensive. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Storm clouds gathered on horizons that stretched endlessly toward judgment or mercy. Serafina set the posters on his desk with careful hands. Your secret's safe. Figured it would be. Question is, what happens now? The question carried implications beyond his criminal past. Something had shifted in the space between them, understanding replacing uncertainty. The careful distance they'd maintained felt suddenly artificial. Now I know why you help people. Part of it. His eyes found hers, held steady. Not all of it. The admission hung in air charged with approaching storm. Serafina felt the weight of his attention, the careful consideration behind every word. This wasn't just about redemption or guilt or making amends. Wind rattled windows as the first drops of rain spattered against glass. Somewhere in the distance, Tobias woke from his nap with happy gurgling sounds. Pete's voice answered, gentle and welcoming. I should check on Tobias. Should. Neither of them moved. Rain began in earnest, drumming against the roof with rhythm that matched something stirring in her chest. The man across from her had killed, stolen, destroyed. Had also saved, protected, redeemed. Serafina. Her name in his voice carried weight she couldn't measure. Promise or warning or something else entirely. Yes? People like us don't get many second chances. When they come, they're usually disguised as something else. The words settled between them heavy with meaning. Second chances disguised as contracts, as desperate bargains, as kindness offered without explanation or expectation. Rain fell harder, washing dust from windows until the world outside came clear. Serafina looked at Zeke Thornfield and saw a man carrying burdens that matched her own. Different sins, same weight. I understand, do you? The question asked more than it revealed. Serafina nodded once, then left him alone with his secrets and his ghosts. Outside his study, the world continued its careful dance around truths. Too dangerous to speak aloud. But something had changed in the telling. The careful walls they'd built were cracking, letting light through spaces that had known only darkness. The revelation changed everything and nothing. Serafina still cooked meals and tended books, but the weight of shared secrets created new gravity between them. Zeke's careful distance softened into something warmer, more dangerous. Days blended into patterns that felt dangerously close to contentment. Tobias thrived in the clean air and open spaces, his laughter drawing smiles from men who'd forgotten how. Pete carved new toys weekly, claiming the boy needed proper entertainment. Spoiling him, Serafina observed, watching Tobias chase a wooden horse across the kitchen floor. Good spoiling. Pete's eyes crinkled. Been too quiet around here too. Long, Zeke appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. Need to check the north pasture. Care to ride along? The invitation surprised her. His usual efficiency didn't include unnecessary company. But Tobias was napping. Pete was available to listen for him, and the afternoon stretched golden with possibility. Yes, they rode through grassland that rolled toward distant mountains. Wind carried scents of sage and possibility. Zeke's Mari moved with easy rhythm, matching the pace of Seraphine's mount without apparent guidance. Beautiful country. The words felt inadequate for landscape that stretched beyond horizons. Hard country. Beauty don't make winter warmer or drought shorter. His voice carried knowledge earned through seasons of struggle, but worth fighting for. They crested a rise that revealed the ranch spread below them. Buildings looked toy-small. Against the vastness, human ambition dwarfed by natural scale. But they persisted, holding their ground against elements that acknowledged no human claims. Your daughters see this place? The question slipped out before caution could stop it. Zeke's hands tightened briefly on his reins, then relaxed. Pain flickered across his features and settled into something deeper. Once, brought her here before I bought it proper. She said it looked lonely. His smile held edges sharp enough to cut. Smart girl, saw what I couldn't. Not lonely now. The observation hung between them, carrying weight beyond its simple words. The ranch held life, now laughter and purpose and people who'd found reasons to stay. No, not now. They dismounted at a creek that cut silver through the grassland. Horses drank while their riders sat on sun-warmed stones. Water moved over rocks worn smooth by countless seasons, its voice the only sound in the vast quiet. Could leave anytime you wanted. Zeke's words dropped into the silence without preamble. Contracts got no legal standing, signed under duress. Seraphine's breath caught. What? Free woman signing papers to save her child. Any judge would void it. He picked up a smooth stone, turned it in his scarred fingers. Been free since the day you arrived. The revelation hit her chest like physical force. Free. Had been free all along while she'd counted days and measured her captivity in careful increments. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was hoping you'd choose to stay. The admission carried vulnerability she'd never heard in his voice. This hard man who'd faced down outlaws and lawmen was afraid of a woman's choice. Choose. Not out of obligation or fear or because you got nowhere else to go. He threw the stone into the creek, watching ripples spread outward. Because you wanted to. Want. The word felt foreign in her mouth. Wanting implied luxury she'd never been able to afford. Survival left little room for desire beyond basic needs. But sitting beside this complicated man in country that stretched toward forever, want stirred in her chest like something waking from long sleep. What if I chose to stay? The question surprised them both. Zeke's hands stilled on another stone, his attention sharpening with focus she felt against her skin. Then you'd stay because you wanted to. Because this place, these people, meant something to you. Because you mean something to me. The unspoken words hung heavy in air that suddenly seemed too thin. They rode back as afternoon shadows lengthened. Toward evening. The conversation had shifted something fundamental between them. Open space for possibilities neither had dared acknowledge. At the ranch, Tobias crawled toward Zeke with delighted squeals. The big man lifted the child with gentle hands, earning giggles that transformed his stern features into something approaching peace. Hey there, little man. Have a good rest? Tobias babbled responses in languages only he understood, tiny hands patting Zeke's cheeks with proprietary affection. The sight hit Serafina with unexpected force, her son accepting this dangerous, gentle man as family. He's taken to you. Good boy, smart. Zeke's voice carried gruff affection. Knows who's safe. Safe, the word carried weight earned through. Weeks of consistent kindness. Zeke had proven himself through actions rather than promises, building trust stone by careful stone. That evening, they worked together in comfortable silence. Serafina prepared supper while Zeke entertained Tobias with wooden blocks Pete had carved. The domestic scene felt simultaneously natural and impossible. Serafina. She turned from the stove, finding him watching her with expression she couldn't read. Never thought I'd have this again. Family sounds. Baby laughter. Woman humming while she works. The admission carried ghosts of his lost daughter, his murdered dreams. But also hope fragile as spring ice, possibility too precious to name directly. Never thought I'd feel safe again. Her own confession balanced his, creating equilibrium between damaged souls finding healing in unexpected places. They stood on opposite sides of the kitchen, speaking truths too dangerous for closer proximity. Want and fear warred in the space between them, neither quite strong enough to bridge the distance. Outside, wind carried scents of changing seasons. Autumn approached with promises of harvest and preparation for harder times ahead. But for now, in lamplight that painted everything golden, peace settled over Thornfield Ranch with weight of benediction. Tobias fell asleep in Zeke's arms, tiny fingers clutching the man's shirt with unconscious trust. Serafina watched this outlaw-turned-protector cradle her son with reverent care, and felt something crack open in her chest. Want, choice, family sounds in lamplight. The future stretched ahead, unmarked by contracts or obligations, shaped only by decisions yet to be made. For the first time since Marcus died, tomorrow felt like possibility rather than endurance. I'll put him to bed. Zeke transferred the sleeping child with practiced care, his fingers brushing hers in the exchange. The touch lasted longer than necessary, carrying promises neither quite dared speak aloud. Later, alone in her cabin with Tobias breathing softly in his carved bed, Serafina sat by the window and watched stars emerge over land that might become home. Choice pressed against her ribs with wings that remembered flight. Tomorrow would bring its own tests, its own possibilities. Tonight, freedom felt real for the first time in months. Dust rose on the horizon 3 days later, marking riders approaching with purpose that felt wrong in the peaceful afternoon. Serafina watched from the kitchen window as Zeke emerged from the barn, hand resting easy on his gun. The gesture spoke of instincts honed by years of danger. Pete appeared at her shoulder, weathered face grim. Trouble coming. The riders resolved into 4 men, led by someone whose bearing screamed authority, bought rather than earned. Behind him rode a man in a sheriff's star that caught sunlight sharp as accusation. 2 deputies flanked them, hands close to weapons. Seraphine's blood turned to ice water. She recognized the leader's proud bearing, the cruel set of his mouth. Jeremiah Washington, Marcus's older brother, who'd always believed the world owed him more than it gave. Get Tobias. Pete's voice cut through her paralysis. Keep him inside. She gathered her son from his blanket on the floor, mind racing through possibilities that all ended badly. Jeremiah had found them. The peace they'd built was about to shatter against the rocks of family obligation and masculine pride. Through the window, she watched the confrontation begin. Jeremiah dismounted with theatrical precision, every movement calculated to project authority. Sheriff Dalton followed suit, badge glinting with borrowed power. The deputies remained mounted, creating a wall of official presence. You'd be Thornfield. Jeremiah's voice carried across the yard. I'm here for my nephew and the woman who took him. Zeke stood motionless as carved stone. Don't recall inviting you onto my land. Don't need invitation when law's involved. Sheriff Dalton stepped forward, hand hovering near his weapon. Got reports of kidnapping, theft. The accusations hung in air thick with implied threat. Seraphine's heart hammered against her ribs. Jeremiah had somehow convinced the sheriff that she'd stolen Tobias, taken something that belonged to the Washington family. Serafina Washington stole my nephew after her husband died. Jeremiah's words carried practiced authority. Took him and the gold Marcus found before his accident. I'm here to reclaim family property. Gold. The lie hit Serafina like physical force. Marcus had died broke, leaving nothing but debts and broken dreams. But Jeremiah had convinced himself otherwise, built fantasy on foundation of greed and masculine entitlement. Lady's free to come and go as she pleases. Zeke's voice carried quiet menace. Child too, not according to this. Sheriff Dalton produced papers that rustled with official threat. Warrant for arrest. Kidnapping and theft. The world tilted sideways. Serafina clutched Tobias closer, feeling trapped jaws closing around them. Jeremiah had bought himself justice with whatever coin Sheriff Dalton preferred. She could run, take Tobias, and disappear into country vast enough to swallow them both. But running meant leaving Zeke to face consequences alone, and the thought cut deeper than fear for her own safety. The kitchen door opened. Zeke entered, with movements controlled as spring steel, danger radiating from every line of his body. They're here for you. I know. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Jeremiah thinks Marcus left gold. Won't believe otherwise. Did he? No. Died owing money to half the territory. She met his eyes, seeing calculation behind concern. But Jeremiah's convinced himself different. Always thought the world owed him more. Zeke absorbed this information with grim efficiency. Sheriff's bought. Deputies too, probably. What do we do? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. We, not I, they face this together now. Consequences shared regardless of outcome. Got friends coming. Federal marshals. His admission surprised her. Sent word weeks ago when I saw how things were developing. Friends? Made some deals. testified against old partners in exchange for clean slate. His smile held no humor. Redemption comes with paperwork. Outside, voices rose in heated discussion. Jeremir's demands met Zeke's refusal with increasing tension. The standoff couldn't last much longer. Serafina, Washington. Sheriff Dalton's voice carried through the walls. "Come out peaceful, or we come in hard." She looked at Tobias, sleeping peacefully despite the chaos surrounding them. Her son deserved better than this constant flight from masculine violence and greed. "I'm going out." "There. No." Zeke's hand found her arm, gentle but firm. "Let me handle this. It's me they want. You getting hurt won't solve nothing. Won't let them take you." The words carried finality that brooked no argument. "Either of you." Pete burst through the door, rifle in weathered hands. "Boss, they're spreading out, trying to surround the house." The situation escalated beyond words into action. Serafina felt pieces moving on board too complex for her understanding, but the outcome seemed predetermined. Jeremir would get what he came for, or people would die trying to stop him. Then thunder rolled across clear sky. Dust rose from the eastern road, marking riders approaching fast. Serafina counted horses through the window, hoping against reason that help might arrive before blood painted the ground. "That them?" Pete squinted toward the approaching riders. Zeke's tension eased fractionally. "Better be." The new arrivals wore federal badges that caught afternoon's sun bright as justice finally arriving. Judge Morrison rode at their head, territorial authority made manifest in flesh and law. Outside, the dynamic shifted as official power met purchased corruption. Sheriff Dalton's bluster died as federal jurisdiction trumped local politics. Jeremir's accusations wilted under legal scrutiny that couldn't be bought or intimidated. "Stand down, Sheriff." Judge Morrison's voice carried across the yard with authority that needed no weapon to back it. "This matter falls under federal jurisdiction now, Judge." Jeremir stepped forward, confidence shaken but not broken. "This woman stole my nephew and family property. I got witnesses." "Bought witnesses don't carry weight in my court." The judge's words cut through deception clean as blade through cloth. Neither do fabricated charges. The trap Jeremir had constructed began collapsing around him. Federal marshals surrounded the corrupt sheriff and his deputies, badges that had seemed so threatening suddenly revealed as tin and bluster. "Mrs. Washington." Judge Morrison's voice found her through the kitchen window. "Please join us. Time to settle this proper." Serafina stepped into afternoon light with Tobias in her arms, Zeke flanking her right side. Pete covered the left, rifle held with easy competence. They faced Jeremir's accusations backed by law that couldn't be purchased. Justice arrived late, but arrived nonetheless, carrying weight that would crush lies beneath its foundation of truth. The confrontation that had seemed destined to end in violence transformed into legal proceeding with civilized rules and honest arbiters. Jeremir's bought authority crumbled against federal oversight that answered to higher powers than local corruption. But the day's revelations were far from over. Judge Morrison spread papers across the kitchen table with methodical precision. Federal marshals flanked the doorway, their presence transforming the homey space into courtroom. Jeremir sat stiff-backed in a chair that might as well have been a defendant's dock. "Let's address the charges." Judge Morrison's voice carried weight of law honestly applied. "Kidnapping first. Mrs. Washington, did you take your son against anyone's will?" "No, sir." "Tobias is my child. Been caring for him since birth." "Any documentation of Mr. Jeremir Washington's legal claim to the child?" Silence stretched as Jeremir's bluster met legal reality. Blood relation meant nothing without proper guardianship papers, and Marcus had died without challenging his wife's natural maternal rights. "Thought not." The judge made notes with careful strokes. "Theft charges next. What gold allegedly went missing?" "Marcus found a vein before he died. Told me about it." Jeremiah's voice carried desperation of crumbling certainty. She's hiding. It's somewhere. Mrs. Washington? My husband died owing money to half the territory. Left nothing but debts and heartbreak. Seraphine's words rang with truth earned through months of struggle. Ask any merchant in Copper Ridge. They'll tell you how poor we were. Judge Morrison gestured to a marshal who produced a ledger thick with recorded testimony. Already. Did. Unanimous testimony confirms your husband's financial difficulties. No evidence of hidden wealth exists. Jeremiah's face crumpled as his fantasies met documented reality. The gold he'd convinced himself Marcus found had never existed outside his own desperate imagination. Now for the more serious matter. The judge's attention shifted to Sheriff Dalton, who sat sweating despite the afternoon's coolness. Falsifying arrest warrants. Accepting bribes. Abuse of official authority. I got legitimate complaints. You got paid to harass an innocent woman. Judge Morrison's words cut through excuses clean as surgical steel. Federal investigation's been watching your activities for months. This incident merely provided final evidence. The corrupt sheriff's badge was removed with formal ceremony that stripped away purchased authority. His deputies followed suit, their temporary power revealed as illusion sustained by greed. Mr. Jeremiah Washington. The judge's voice carried judicial weight. Attempted bribery of public officials. Filing false charges. Fraud. I was trying to protect family interests. You were trying to steal a child based on non-existent inheritance. The judgment fell with finality. You'll face charges in territorial court. Jeremiah was led away by federal marshals. His proud bearing collapsed into the reality of consequences. The man who demanded justice found it applied to his own actions instead. Judge Morrison turned to Zeke with expression that mixed official duty and personal respect. Mr. Thornfield, your cooperation with federal authorities has been noted. All outstanding warrants are hereby dismissed. Appreciated, Judge. Your testimony helped us apprehend the remaining members of your former gang. Restitution has been made to affected banks. Slate's clean. The words carried weight of redemption officially recognized. Zeke's careful work to earn forgiveness had borne fruit in legal absolution, Mrs. Washington. The judge's attention settled on her with gentle authority. Your indenture contract is void. Signed under duress without proper legal representation. You're free to determine your own path. Free. The word resonated through her chest with power she'd forgotten existed. No contracts bound her. No obligations. Forced her hand. Choice stretched ahead, unmarked by desperation or masculine control. What will you choose? Judge Morrison asked. Serafina looked around the kitchen that had become home. Pete bounced Tobias on his knee, earning delighted giggles. Zeke watched her with eyes that held hope too fragile to voice. The ranch hands gathered in the doorway showed faces marked by genuine affection. Family, not by blood or law, but by choice and shared struggle and love freely given. I choose to stay. The words carried weight of decision made without coercion. Not as indentured servant or desperate woman with no alternatives, but as equal partner in something worth building. Judge Morrison smiled. Then it's settled. Mrs. Washington retains full custody of her child and complete freedom to make her own decisions. The legal proceedings concluded with handshakes and official papers. Federal marshals departed with their prisoners, leaving afternoon peace to settle over Thornfield Ranch once more. Evening brought celebration, quiet but deep. Pete produced a bottle of whiskey saved for special occasions. The hands gathered around the kitchen table, sharing stories and laughter while Tobias crawled between chair legs with joyful abandon. Later, after the men had retired to their bunks, Serafina and Zeke sat on the porch watching stars emerge over land that stretched toward forever. Tobias slept peacefully in his carved bed, safe in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring familiar faces and gentle hands, regrets, Zeke asked. About staying? No. She considered the question honestly. About the path that brought me here? Can't regret what led to this. Even selling yourself? Even that. Desperate times call for desperate measures. But I learned something important. What's that? The difference between being owned and being loved. The words settled between them with weight of truth, earned through struggle. Zeke had bought her contract but given her freedom, had demanded service but offered partnership, had claimed ownership but chosen love instead. Got something to ask. You. His voice carried nervousness she'd never heard before. Ask. Not asking out of gratitude or because you got nowhere else to go. He turned to face her fully, moonlight catching the planes of his weathered face. Asking because I love you and that boy. Want to build a real family together. Will you marry me? The proposal hung in air sweet with possibility. Serafina looked at this complicated man who'd saved them both, who'd chosen redemption over destruction, who'd offered love instead of ownership. I learned something these past months, she said. Love isn't about being bought or sold. It's about choosing each other every single day. That a yes? That's a yes. They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching stars wheel overhead. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys. But tonight, love had chosen them both. 6 months later, Pete officiated their wedding on the ranch. Tobias gurgled happily in Seraphine's arms as she spoke vows that bound her by choice rather than contract. The sunset painted everything golden, blessing their union with light that promised better days ahead. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best, Serafina reflected, watching her new husband carve toys for their son. I thought I was selling my freedom, but instead I found it. Found love, found family. The ranch thrived under their partnership. Desperate people still found sanctuary at Thornfield, but now they were welcomed by a woman who understood their struggles and a man who'd learned the value of second chances. Love had indeed chosen them all, binding them together with bonds stronger than contracts or blood. They'd built something beautiful from the ashes of desperation, proving that redemption was possible for anyone brave enough to choose it. The future stretched ahead, unmarked by fear or obligation, shaped only by love freely given and gratefully received. In the end, that made all the difference. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.